My boyfriend brought his best friend on our road trip and she spent the entire time trying to break us up. My boyfriend decided to tell me the night before we left for our trip that he had decided to invite his best friend to come along without even asking me if it was okay first. At that point, I was just so annoyed and tired and I did not have the energy to pick a fight about it, so the next morning we picked her up at her house before starting our journey. The moment she got into my car, she had an attitude with me. As usual, she was super touchy-feely with my boyfriend and was barely acknowledging me in the slightest. I started to question why my boyfriend never seemed to register just how disrespectful his best friend behaved towards me, and only a couple hours into the road trip did I regret letting her into the car in the first place. His best friend just kept making excuses to touch him as well as making loads of inside jokes that made absolutely no sense to me but had my boyfriend howling with laughter. I started to feel like a third wheel within my own relationship. My boyfriend seemed to be more happy and entertained with her than he ever was with me. The longer we drove, the more tense I felt and the more I regretted not speaking up about her presence on the trip before we left. I felt my blood pressure rise with every state that we drove through. It just felt like his best friend was doing everything she could to press my buttons. When we stopped to use the bathroom at a gas station in the evening, I saw her holding his hand in the convenience store and I remember thinking that it was so inappropriate and weird, but my boyfriend didn't seem to mind, so I continued to stay quiet. I had finally reached my limit when it had been my turn to drive, and after I had been driving for 4 hours straight I turned around to look into the backseat only to find them spooning each other while they slept. I felt a huge wave of rage and nausea come on as I saw my boyfriend holding her in front of him like he usually does to me. I yelled at them to wake them up and ask them what the hell was going on, but all they said was that they had just fallen asleep and the cuddling was a complete accident since there wasn't much room in the car with all our bags. His best friend did not sound apologetic at all and he even had the nerve to let out a little giggle during this confrontation. At that instant, I knew I had made a huge mistake coming out here with them, but there was no way I was going to let his best friend steal my boyfriend from right under my nose. So I decided to drink a bunch of energy drinks so I could stay up and keep an eye on them. I really pushed my body to the limit, and when I crashed hard. I fell asleep in the backseat and slept for almost 6 hours straight. I was sleeping really deeply and I remember having anxiety as I felt myself falling asleep since I was sure they might be messing around with each other while I slept. I already felt like I was living a waking nightmare at this point in the trip, but I had no idea just how much worse things would get after I woke up. Boyfriend brought his best friend on our road trip and she spent the entire time trying to break us up. So far on the trip I had already caught my boyfriend and his best friend cuddling each other in the backseat while it was my turn to drive, so I was freshly suspicious of them. I tried to drive as long as I could so I wouldn't fall asleep and leave them alone with each other. But eventually, I drove for so long and drank so many energy drinks that I just crashed in the backseat and slept for almost half a day while my boyfriend drove. When I woke up I tried not to make it obvious that I wasn't sleeping anymore so I could try and see how they were acting when they thought I wasn't looking. To no surprise at all I opened my eyes to see his best friend playing with my boyfriend's hair as he drove. If I hadn't been watching her hit on my boyfriend for literally the entirety of our relationship, maybe this would have looked innocent to me, but I knew exactly what she was trying to do. Suddenly a new thought tore through my head: why the hell was he letting this happen? I realized that I had just about enough of the both of them, and that both of these people obviously resented me in their own way. His best friend hated me for taking away her friend, and my boyfriend obviously didn't care for me if he was continuing to place his best friend's feelings over my comfortability again and again. I laid there in the backseat still pretending to be asleep while I watched her play with his hair as if they were the happiest couple in the world. To my absolute horror, I realized that she was squirming a little bit in her seat and making these soft, suppressed moaning sounds. That's when I saw my boyfriend turn to look at her and ask her if she liked that. That's when I realized that my boyfriend had his arms stretched over the car's console and was touching her between her legs. I could have grabbed the wheel right then and crashed the car to take us all out with. How emotionally devastated I felt seeing that. But I just sat up straight quickly and asked them if they were having fun. His beach best friend just started laughing and my boyfriend looked startled and started stuttering out excuses. As I mentioned in my first post, we had taken my car for the road trip since the entire trip had been my idea. I yelled at my boyfriend to pull the car over right now and for both of them to get the hell out. He kept trying to tell me to calm down while his best friend called me crazy and said not to get mad, that he wanted her more than he wanted me. I just ignored both of them, and as soon as the car pulled over, I started hurling all of their bags out on the side of the road. This is when they both started to actually freak out and started to beg me not to leave them there in the middle of nowhere. We really were in the middle of nowhere too. We had driven halfway through Montana, and I had woken up when we were in the middle of a long stretch of rural road with no signposts or buildings in sight. I ignored their pleading and I threw out every last thing that they had in my car onto the side of the road, no matter what they said or how hard they cried. When they realized that I was 100% serious, they started screaming at me, saying that their phones were both going to die soon and that I couldn't just abandon them there. I told them that I was sure they could get through anything if they had each other, since their bond was so strong, and I sped off, leaving them on the other side of the country. Honestly, I know that it was an extreme reaction, but I don't give a damn. I should have cut my bum a boyfriend and his best friend out of my life ages ago, but at least I got to watch that smug smile slide off of his best friend's face before I drove away.